Hey everybody, I'm David Magone. Today I'm going to show you a couple of tips and tricks that you can use to work on Padma Mayurasana, basically a lotus form of the peacock posture. Now when you're doing this, the first thing to keep in mind is that the peacock pose is essentially a lever, like a teeter-totter on the playground. Just like a teeter-totter, if you have a really heavy kid on one side and then a lighter kid on the other side, one end won't lift. So if you find that it's difficult to get one side of your body off the floor, it's very likely that you need to actually shift the positioning of your arms to transfer some more of your body's weight forward. Now to do that in this posture, there's many different places you can place your elbow. Initially, some people like to draw them into the belly, but if you have a little bit more weight on the bottom half of yourself, then you'll find it difficult to get off of the ground. So if you're in a position where your legs just won't lift no matter what you try, you can do two things. You can either slide your head substantially forward, or you can shift the positioning of your fulcrum, which is essentially your arms. Now to do that, you basically begin by turning your hands toward your body so your fingers face backwards. And then before you enter the posture, you round your spine a lot, you pull the front of your pelvis upward, and you lodge your elbows back as close to the pelvis as you can. So you kind of squiggle and you wiggle a little bit back and forth until you get that. Now once you've gotten that point, you take your head down to the floor, you let your legs lift all the way off of the ground, and at that point, you'll oftentimes be able to lift your head just a little higher upwards. Once you've gotten the ability to actually balance on the arms like that, the next thing you need to figure out how to do is to basically move your joints around a little bit so that you can use all of your joints to get your legs a little higher into the air. Now, when you're doing Padma Mayurasana, if your leg bones jam into the sockets, the legs won't be able to lift too terribly high. So what that means is when you're in the posture, if you essentially lock down through your two front ribs, you'll feel that the legs at some point jam against the sockets and they just won't go any further. In order to fully extend the legs, you actually have to allow a little bit of a back bend element. So in this particular example, if you simply let your ribs flare out, notice that the knees drop more. And if you continue to let the ribs flare further and further, they'll actually drop closer to the ground until ultimately they come all the way down. Now what that means is when you're rocking the balance, you essentially have to treat it as a back bend. If you roll your tail under and really tuck your ribs down in the front, the legs will never lift more than maybe 5-6 inches off of the floor. So when you're up in the full extravaganza, rather than doing this, rolling the tailbone under, you need to lift your tail really high, you need to curl your chin back, and you try to do some of the range of motion through the extension of your back as well as the motion in the hips. Now if you're ready to put that all together, you essentially draw your legs into position. You need to let your lotus be relatively loose, so you kind of slide your ankles over to the sides. This will give your legs a little bit more range of motion. And then finally, you plant your hands on the ground like we talked about before. You sort of round your spine, you draw them as close to the front of the pelvis as you can. If it helps, you can put your head on the ground, and then at that point the knees lift. Now at this point here, you start moving with your back muscles. So you extend upward, you let your ribs flow out just a little tiny bit. At that point, the legs will lift higher. You can let your chin rest on the floor if it helps, or you can lift it all the way up. Now to bail, you take your knees back down to the ground, and then of course flip your legs around to try it on the other side. Padma Mayurasana is something that takes a little bit of practice. If you find it difficult to do the pose with your head lifted at first, you can totally put your head on the ground. But then after a little while, if you start to work on that lever sort of action, I think you'll find the ability to lift both your head and your legs. So have fun, give it a shot, and hit me up if you have any questions.